And now, a story from the Appleseed.
Just running through it in my head quick. These first two I probably haven't told in 7 years. When they requested them, because they tell you what you're going to do. I honestly was like, oh man, I had to listen to my own album. I'm not kidding. And here's the funny thing. I didn't even have it in my iTunes. I don't even own my own stuff. I was like, that's not a good sign. I had to buy it because I don't have my big computer. I had to buy my album to listen to this. That's so sad. Anyways, yeah. So I love this one. Okay, I'm just having so many good memories from this. Okay, that's how I want to start it. My dad grew up on a tobacco farm, and he would help his daddy pinch the tobacco. He'd put oil on his hands. His dad and he and then the workers would put oil on their hands so that the tobacco wouldn't kind of get into their skin. And when his father passed away, he sold that farm and he bought a little chocolate box-sized house, a little ranch house that my mom had always dreamt of. And he bought an Arco station. The thing is that my dad was always hardworking, honest, and giving. And that's not a bad thing, but it can sometimes ripple out in a way that may not be the most profitable. When he bought that Arco station, people knew that my dad was a mechanical genius. And they would pop in with their cars. Buck would say, oh, I just got this truck for my son. I think there's a problem with the carburetor. And my dad would say, oh, Buck, let me just look at it. And then as he wiped his hands, he'd say, you don't owe me anything. Or if a woman pulled in to get some gas, and we're going back to the days where the bell would ring and my brothers would come out and wash the window and pump the gas. It was a lovely thing. My dad would walk out and go, I heard some pinging in that engine, and he'd look in and see all these kids in the back of the station wagon. And so he'd tinker around a little bit and say, here's your problem and I can cut you a deal, or, hey, I fixed it already for you. It's done. It was just a small thing. You needed some more oil or whatever it was. And he'd look at those kids again and say, you can pay me when you can. The thing is, those kind of cans don't feed a family of 6. And so money was tight. I called my mom one day when I was coming home from Tennessee because I had the realization that we were actually, I wouldn't say we were not poverty level poor, but we were definitely lower income because she stayed home with us while my dad tried to get that business off the ground. And I said, Mom, were we kind of poor? And she goes, no, because we had enough. In a world of high consumption, that's not acceptable anymore. But I lived my whole life until my mid-30s without realizing that we did not have a lot because we had enough. And so what that meant was that we didn't get stuff. My grandson just contacted me and was like, Nana, I really want these. There's some kind of panda sneaker. Who knows? It's this panda shoe. And I'm like, okay, let me just take a look at it. And so I looked it up. I'm like, holy moly. But I'm like, that's about what they cost across the board anymore. I said, I'll get them for you. Is it his birthday? No. Christmas? Wasn't even Easter, nothing. I just got them for him. My grandmother never did that. If my grandmother came, all we could hope for was a miniature Reese's cup. That was it. If she showed up with one of those, we were millionaires. She would have, if I would have called her and said I wanted shoes that cost that much, she would have just laughed and laughed and laughed. Like, Kimmy, you're such a funny kid. It was just, that's the way it went. My mom never got us anything at the store. She made a list throughout the week when she went to the store, and she never strayed from that list. She had a very tight budget. One time, I took the little pencil, which I know she stole from church, and I wrote Ovaltine in between 2 different items, thinking maybe just because all of us kids are with her, she's in a hurry, she'll just accidentally grab it. When you are so desperate for sweets that you want like a cardboard tasting chocolate drink, that is a sign of where you're at as a child in your home, right? We would be walking through the store and I'd say, Mom, please, can you just please give me, a penny so I can get some chiclets? We could drop a penny in the machine and get a handful. And I'd say, I'll share them with everybody, I'll promise. And she'll go, no, sugar is a frivolity. We are not going to spend money on that. And I'd be like, Mom, and I'd pull on her dress. Mom, please, can I please just have a quarter to buy a small pack of blackjack gum? And she'd go, no, You're not going to get any money for candy. And I'd be like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And she'd lean down, she'd grab me and she'd say, girl, patience is what parents have when people are looking. She'd take a hold and she'd say, girl, I would kill you if I had the money to bury you. And don't think bad of her, because I pushed that woman like a pinball machine all the time. So we never got anything except at Christmas and at birthday. That was it, birthday and Christmas. And you planned. Birthday, you'd get one nice gift, whatever it is you wanted. Christmas, we'd get the same two things. One thing that we asked for, like a bike. You do the big things, right? Like a big wheel or just something really good, new bat, ball, and mitt, the whole kit and caboodle, right? And then you always got one other box. And on Christmas Eve, my mom always would throw a party for the relatives, friends, neighbors, and they'd come in. I always thought it was funny. It's like, it's Christmas time, get out the pickles and olives. That was a big deal. We're having pickles and olives. Ooh, Christ is born, pickles and olives, Nuts, pickles, and olives, the Savior is born. She'd get us all dressed up. And then I always had the job of filling up the Tupperware container with olives, gherkins, dill, and nuts. It was a very great honor to bring that to the table. And then she'd make all kinds of food, and people would bring food. And she would say to us, if you behave, and if you take coats at the door, and if you help me clean up, tonight you get to open one of your gifts. And I thought that's pretty good, because that's 50% of our gifts. And we would. We'd take the coats, throw them on the master bed, until they were a big pile, and we'd be polite and offer people things and pick up cups. And when it was all over, we'd get in our pajamas and we'd go into the living room and we'd each get that one box that wasn't what we asked for. And every year we would work hard and behave and help, even though every year that box contained the same exact thing. We were still excited. A year's supply of underwear. A year's supply of underwear, a little silk slip for under our dresses as little girls. The boys got way less underwear than us. I don't know why guys need less underwear for a whole year than girls, but that's neither here nor there for this particular story. And so that is what it was. That's how it worked. You only got things during those times. Well, a birthday was coming up for me, and I knew what I wanted. I wanted a potholder maker, and I got it. My potholder maker was a red metal square. It came, you had one, didn't you? I see you right there. I didn't, you just think it's cute. Do you want one? Is that your mother? There you go. Get her underwear and a potholder maker for Christmas. She's golden. You're welcome. Okay. It was a red metal square, and it came with a long silver hook and then a bag of the ugliest colored loops you ever saw in your life. They were like green, white, black, yellow, red. No one had a kitchen those colors, and if they did, intervention was necessary. But I loved it. And every Saturday morning, the rule was the first kid out of bed got to pick the cartoons for the day. So I was always the first one up. I mean, even now, though I move a little slower, my brain is always on fire. I'd be the first kid up, and I'd be so quiet because I wouldn't want to wake anybody, because then my older brothers would basically just torture me to get downstairs before me, because that was the deal, whoever got downstairs first. But I would wake up, and I would open the closet door really quiet because I shared a bedroom, and I would get my potholder maker in the loops, and I would go downstairs and turn on the TV and turn it to the channel that had Johnny Quest and Tom and Jerry and the Bugs Bunny. Oh man, back when it was violent but just cuter than it is now. And I would sit cross-legged on the couch, and I would put the loops to my right and the loom on my lap, and I could take and pull. I got to the point where I could just pull those loops right across that loom without even looking at it. And then I would drop my hook in, and I could weave, and I'd hook up a loop and I'd pull. And I truly could do it all without looking. I had made so many potholders. And then when I was done, I would take and you would braid the edge. And as you rounded second, third base on that loom, you had to move really quick because they'd start to pop up and you were going to lose it, right? And when you were done, you pulled that last loop and you had a potholder. It was fascinating. I mean, how have times changed that we as children thought making potholders was the best thing ever? I mean, times have really changed. And I remember one Saturday morning, I woke up and I went to the closet, and I was the first one up. I listened, nobody's moving. I don't hear the TV downstairs. So I opened the closet door, and I saw on the floor all kinds of potholders that had been building up. I had given my mom so many she couldn't shut her drawer. I'd given my grandma so many, and she had bought all these little magnetic hooks and put them on her fridge. So her whole fridge was covered in potholders. It looked like a quilted refrigerator. She thought it was beautiful. So did I. And I stood there for a minute, and I'm like, why do you keep making these potholders when you have so many? And then I remembered I heard something my mom tell my dad at breakfast. She said, Spike, with that new gas station, you need to have a marketing plan. You need to have a marketing plan of how you're going to get customers. And then I thought, you know what? I can do this. My dad had become an entrepreneur. I'd learned that word, and I thought, I'm going to sell these potholders. So I got my clothing, got those potholders, went to the bathroom, and quietly dressed. And then I went downstairs into the garage and shoved all of those potholders into my basket. And I set out into the neighborhood. And I thought this should be relatively easy because I was surrounded by relatives. They're going to buy from me. And so I went to the first house, and it was my Aunt Joanne. I knocked on the door. She came to the door, still a little sleepy in her PJs, and she said, Kimmy, what are you doing? And I said, I'm selling potholders. I had 2 in my hand. And she goes, what? I said, I'm selling potholders. I said, I'm selling them for money. I said, 50 cents a piece. And she goes, why are you selling them? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, what's the money going to go towards? I said, me? And she said, I don't need any, and shut the door. I went back to my bike and put them in, and I'm like, well, okay, well, that didn't go like I expected. So I went to the next house. It was Terry and Chuck, my aunt and uncle. I knocked on the door, and they opened the door, and they were standing there together, and they're like, what are you doing? I said, I'm selling potholders. And they said, what? I said, I'm selling potholders. They said, did you make them for Pioneer Girls? We were too poor for Girl Scouts. They said, did you make them for Pioneer Girls? And I said, no. I said, I made them myself. I got a potholder maker for my birthday. And I said, I have a whole bunch. I'm selling them for 50 cents a piece. And they said, well, what are you going to do with the money? They said, what are you saving for? I said, nothing. I said, I just want money. I never have money. My mom takes all the checks out of the birthday card. She says she's put in a savings account. I don't think she is. And they said, Kimmy, we don't really need any potholders. And they shut the door. Well, that went on for 2 more houses. And I got on my bike, still my basket packed with potholders. And I thought, what am I going to do? And as I rode around where we lived, very rural, all these houses were a little spread out, I thought to myself, the problem is you don't have a marketing plan. You don't have a strategy. And I remembered the conversation I heard at the breakfast table with my mom and my dad. And I thought, I just need to come up with a plan. So I rode around for a while, and I created the perfect marketing plan. First, I told myself, get out of the neighborhood where they know you. So I went up Farm Drive Hill, turned right onto Locust Grove Road, took that corner, took that hill down that dipped deep. Oh, I love it when the bike vibrates and your hair is flowing. I made a left into that little tiny community. And I went to the first house that seemed welcoming. They had over 100 salt and pepper shakers collected in their front windows. They had pink flamingos, plastic squirrels riveted into rocks, and cement saints in the back. And I thought to myself, this is a very well-rounded human being. I pulled out 2 potholders, and I went up to the door, and I knocked. And a lovely lady answered the door, and she was wiping her hands on a little tea towel, and she said, well, hello there. She said, what can I do for you? And I said, well, my name's Kimmy, and I said, I'm from down the road, and I said, I made potholders, and I'm selling them for 50 cents a piece. And she said, oh, let me see. And she examined my work, and she said, these are lovely. She said, what are you going to do with the money? I was ready. I said, my mother's very sick. And I said, I just want money to buy her flowers. She said, you wait right here. She went into her house, came back with $1.25, a dollar bill and a quarter. She handed it to me and said, you are so sweet. And I said, oh, thank you. She said, I hope your mother feels better soon. I said, oh, so do I. We all do. I went to my basket, twisted that dollar and put it on the inside weave of that basket and dropped the quarter into the bottom. I went to the next house. I knocked. I had 4 potholders because I saw how well my marketing had worked. The lady came to the door and she said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "I made these potholders myself and I'm selling them." I said, 50 cents a piece. She said, "Why are you selling them?" I said, "My mother." She said, "Oh," she said, "that's precious." She's like, "Hank, come out here." Hank came out. He dug in his pocket. He gave me every bit of change that he had in his pocket. They took those 4 potholders. I dropped the change into my basket. By the 5th house, I had sold every potholder. And my mother had an unexplainable rash all over her body. I went home and I parked the bike. I took the money out, shoved it in my jean pockets, took the dollars, hid them up under my shirt, held it tight so they wouldn't fall out. I went through the basement garage door, up the stairs through that room where we always played, through the hall, past the kitchen as fast as I could. Everybody was up and busy and eating. My mom was cooking. I went into the bedroom, shut the door and locked it. My sister was not in there. And I spread that money out before me. I smelled my sweaty coin hands. I had never had so much money in my life. I counted it twice, took all the coins and put them between my mattress and my box spring. And then I took the dollar bills and put them underneath my pillow and tucked the end in so that my sister wouldn't get nosy. I opened the door, went down, and I ate my breakfast. And then I thought, I'm going to take a little time to read. I was feeling pretty leisurely that day. Had a hard day's work that morning. I slid down between the beds. There was a little bookcase, and I pulled out the Brothers Grimm book from Reader's Digest that I love to this day. And I was just reading and minding my business when I heard, "Kimberly, come down here." It was my mother. "Don't get ahead of me, lady." I went down into the den, the magical place where the paneling in the den matched the paneling on the Oldsmobile station wagon. And what I saw there was very interesting. My mom was not in her rocking chair. She was sitting in my dad's chair. And in the rocking chair and on the couch were some ladies that looked vaguely familiar. And my mother said, "Kimmy." I looked at her. I had been staring at the little piles of potholders in these women's laps. She said, "These women who go to our church told me that you were up in Locust Grove selling potholders. Is that true?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, they told me that you told them that you needed to sell them to get money to buy flowers. Is that true?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And then she talked real slow, like I had lost all intelligence. She said, "Why would you tell them I was sick? Why would you do that?" I looked down at my feet and I thought, this answer will determine the rest of my life. And so I leaned upon the wisdom of my father and what he would do when my mom talked to him like that. I looked at her and I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Girl, I know you hid that money somewhere. You go to your bedroom and you get it and you bring it back here now." I was walking down the hallway and I thought, man, I got to give all that money back. And then I thought, oh, she's going to have enough money to bury me. I went to my bedroom and put the coinage on top of the bed, pulled out the dollar bills, and I scooped it up into my hands and cradled it. It's very interesting because, not much time had passed before I had just been feeling so high on the fact that I had all that money, and now here I stood, holding it not much later, and it felt very dirty. And that is when I realized what it felt like to be a politician. I took the money down, and my mom made me give the ladies each their money back and apologized. She made me apologize. We told them they could keep the potholders. They handed them back to me with lips pressed firm, shaking their head. No, false advertising. And so there I stood with a handful of potholders. And my mom said, "Are there more?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Put those in your bedroom and meet me down in the car." I went down to the car with the remaining money, and we drove into Locust Grove. She made me point out the houses where I felt the rest of the people lived because, man, I didn't even know those ladies went to our church. It's like, I hope I get it right. And I did. And when we were all done and all the money was gone and I had another lap full of potholders because nobody wanted them, I thought, just take your punishment. My mom was consistent and fair. And so you just took your punishment. And so I sat there staring at that Oldsmobile logo on the glove box, trying not to make any kind of face that could be misinterpreted as disrespect. And I waited. My mom was not one of those moms who said, "Wait till your father comes home." My friend Kim Snyder, who lived on the other side of the house, that's what her mom always did. And it was awesome because by the time her dad got home, he was tired. She had fizzled down. She never got in trouble. My mom executed immediately. She was judge, jury, and executioner, and she whistled while she did it. She had no problem taking control of the disciplinary behavior in the house. And so I thought, here it comes. And the whole way home, I kept waiting. Nothing. We pulled into the driveway, and she turned the car off and dropped the keys in her lap, and I was like, here it comes. Nothing. Finally, I looked over at her, and she looked at me, and she said, "Kimmy, this goes against everything your father believes in. Honest, hardworking, giving. Usually I handle these things, but I think this time your daddy needs to handle it." My dad's name is Spike. And I am not that is truth. And I was like, no way, not Dad. My dad was a big guy with large hands, grease under the fingernails, nicks and cuts from working in engines. He was a tough guy. And I thought, I do not want to deal with him. And as I went into the house, I was walking behind my mom. And when we went through the kitchen, there were casseroles on the counter from women in the neighborhood who'd heard my mom was dying. Hope welled up in me, and I thought, free food. She's not going to have to cook for 4 days. And I said, "Mom, see? Look, you're not going to have to cook." And she said, "Go to your room." So I went to my room, shut the door, and I sat on the bed. And I had to wait for my father to come home. Now, when I sat there, I did some serious thinking. You may think that I was nervous because of a physical punishment or a groundation. That is not even the issue. I was nervous and upset because I loved my dad. There's two kinds of parenting. Put the fear in them, and when you're gone, they're going to do what they want. Or make them love you so much and respect you that you don't want to break their heart. And that's what I knew I was going to do. I knew that I was going to break my dad's heart, and I was just dreading it. Ticking off my mom, I did that every day. That was no big deal. But not my dad. I heard the car pull in. I heard him shut the door to the basement as he walked into the house. I heard low murmuring and mumbling as my mom said, "You know what your daughter did today?" And then the handle on the door turned and my dad walked in. I didn't even have to look up. The smell of grease and Old Spice preceded him everywhere he went. I kept my head down as he sat on top of my bed, and I went down at least an inch with the weight of him. His hands rested on his knees. He was wearing that deep, dark teal blue mechanic's pants and shirt tucked in, buttoned up with the white and red oval that said Spike. And I waited. Nothing. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I looked up at him, and he was looking at me. And in his eyes, for the first and last time in my life, I saw the twinkle of disappointment and amusement in the same place. And he said, "Kimmy, your mother told me what you did today." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Honey, if you can't sell it honestly, then it's not worth selling." And he leaned forward, kissed me on the forehead, and left. I thought, well, he's going to come back, I'm sure. He did not. I was not called to dinner, so I didn't eat. For the next few days, my mom and dad didn't look at me or talk to me. I think they learned that on Wild Kingdom, sponsored by Mutual of Omaha. When one of the herd misbehaves, create a circle and keep them out till they learn their lesson and they can re-entry the herd. I mean, they just wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't talk to. It was the worst thing in the world. I'm a talker. Talk, 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 talk. They wouldn't respond. They wouldn't look at me. Nothing at all. That went on for a week. And then they came back to life and they welcomed me back. And that was my punishment. And did it stick? There is not one thing that I will put my hand to or my name on that I am not 100% sure about. A lesson pushed deep into me by the silent wisdom of my family. Now, I'm still selling those Potholders. I brought some with me. They're $4.50. My dog needs surgery. Song. So I wrote a little song for my dad. Daddy wasn't a man of many words. He believed in being seen and not being heard. He'd sit back and he'd take it all in. He was a shoulder you could lean on and a good, solid friend. The words I love you, he didn't say them every day. He believed it's what you do, honey, and not what you say. So I knew my daddy loved me by looking at his hands. There was grease under his fingernails from fixing engines for our keep, and nicks and cuts from digging in, work that was elbow deep, and the smell of grease and Old Spice would linger in the air. Oh, I knew my daddy loved me by looking at his hands. Well, fixing flats and lending a hand. If you were stuck, well, my daddy was the man. He'd pull you out, fill up your tank, fix that old pinging noise, no need for thanks. 'Cause he always said, neighbors are family and so are friends, and a man's wealth is determined by counting them. My daddy was rich and so was I, and I knew that he loved me by the hands at his side. There was grease under his fingernails from fixing engines for our keep, and nicks and cuts from digging in, work that was elbow deep, and the smell of grease and Old Spice would linger in the air. Oh, I knew my daddy loved me. Yes, I knew my daddy, he loved me by looking at his hands. Ooh.
Thanks for joining us for a story from the Appleseed.